Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Swedenborgian Life Live. Today we're going to be talking about good versus evil in the context of the mountain. My name is Curtis Childs, and I'll be your host. This is Dr. Jonathan Rose. Thanks so much for hanging
Curtis.
out.
Hey everybody.
Hey, you're already here hanging out. Why don't you just go ahead and like and subscribe? I know you're just starting to watch, so that's a risky maneuver, but that really helps us out, and especially to subscribe helps you out getting the fresh Swedenborg content. And you get content like the content we're about to be content to give you right now. So we're following up from...
Oh, I like that content, Joe.
We're following up from... our subscriptions just went down like 450. All right, we're following up from this show, which was last week. We called it How Earth Reveals God's Love. And this was our opus on correspondences.
Yeah, and especially mountains, the correspondence of mountains. It was awesome.
And we're going to look deeper into this because even though we spent all this time and we were looking at the nature of mountains and how they represent this love that brings us into a higher state of mind, we actually didn't even give you the half of it because we looked at the positive symbolism of mountains, but actually mountains can have both a positive and a negative symbolism.
Right.
And that's actually as it is with all correspondences. So what could be the opposite of the love of a mountain? We'll tell you in a minute. First, we're going to do our icebreaker, which is where we get warmed up, you get warmed up. So we're going to have a little bit of participation coming up next. If you're in the chat, and at this point you are, but when I say this point, it could be you watching it recorded later. No space and no time on the internet. But if you're in the chat live right now, get ready. We're going to answer a question that's related to our topic. And we want to hear what you guys think about it as well. You type those responses in. Our team grabs them at the end of the show. We'll read them all off because we want to have a community of thought. That's what we're up to, and we can't have it without you. All right, question. You ready?
Question.
The question is as follows. How can you tell the difference between positive and negative kinds of love or pleasure? And this is an essential thing to think through if you're going to do the Swedenborg route, because Swedenborg is all about there being different kinds of love. We think of love as, love is good. If someone's got love, you want to be around them. All you need is love.
That's right.
That sounds good. Now, that is not the case always, because you can, how does Swedenborg define love? I mean, he lets it just kind of be an attraction, whether that's to something helpful or harmful, right?
Harmful, that's right. And the pleasure goes with both.
Yeah.
And the thing is that on the outside, even if they may be very, he uses the example sometimes of wax fruit and things like that.
Yeah.
That could look indistinguishable from even pretty close up, a foot or two away. You think, oh, that's an apple. And then, it's just a, plastic, and they didn't have plastic back then, but they had wax fruit and fake fruit. And so
the point is unassailable either way.
That's right. That it's difficult to tell the difference. And so my first thought and response is that this is such an important question. I can't think of a more important question than how you tell those things apart. Well, because we're able to delude ourselves, aren't we? Like we get thoughts that...
Exactly right. I was trying to cut you off to say your very point you were about to make. Well, why do we have to have all these campaigns saying, hey, don't bully people, don't commit crimes, don't do this kind of stuff? If there was no allure to those actions, but everything negative, Swedenborg says, comes with a kind of pleasure attached to it. Now, all the ego stuff, everything hell actually can feel good. And so it's hard for us to pick out what's hell and what's heaven, because to the stuff we're into, they both feel like heaven.
Right, and when you're young, you have a heavenly experience. I'm thinking about, childhood. You'll have a heavenly experience, and then you torment some classmate or something. They both feel good, and you can't really tell the difference. And
Yeah.
And so one of the ways that I would say that I try to tell that love and that pleasure apart is almost not looking. The only thing I would look for inside myself is how I feel after the fact, shortly after the fact, because I find there's sort of a siphoning effect. When I do something good for people sometimes, at the time I might feel neutral, I might even feel tired or sort of my heart's not in or something like that. But then just afterwards, I'll get this rush of love, and then I'll realize, I think I just did a good thing.
Yeah.
And sometimes I do something that I think is fine, or I say something that I think is fine, and all of a sudden this anger is there because I realize, actually that was kind of a snarky comment, and it doubled after I siphoned it in by doing it. The other way I try to tell...
I forgive you, by the way.
Thank you. is is through other people, like the feedback of other people, because other people sometimes, someone will say, "Why are you yelling?" And I didn't think I was yelling, but that's the way you're coming across.
Yeah, I would add to that, I think about monosodium glutamate, or MSG, which is this thing that it's the thing in food,
right,
that as far as I can tell, it something doesn't actually taste good, but you put this chemical on there and it makes it taste really good because it messes with your taste system. And I think
actually amps up the way you taste the salt or something like that. It makes the salt better or something.
That amp up, I sort of feel like these ego or hell pleasures have that buzz, like this. I'm peaking the speakers.
A little louder or a little more vibrant.
It just feels a little bit out of control. That you can tell that the
it's amped up in some way.
It's amped up that the pleasure of usefulness and of love and of community is more like actually outside versus like a cartoon of outside.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Right. And I also think so often the Lord is playing a long game, that you'll get satisfaction later sometimes.
Yeah.
Like the evil kinds of love and pleasure are very much into instant gratification, and you'll pay for it later. It's terrible.
Oh man.
Later, the next day or whenever. But the other kind might even not feel like that big a deal right at the moment, but it's like, it starts to grow on you. Like this feels good. It's going in a good direction.
I was driving in the car and I was having this thought of like the pleasure of hell is that whatever the nature of hell is that whatever pleasure you feel as you're going for it, eventually it's misery. The net effect is misery. So
where the road ends up is
So you're getting this like, this is going to be awesome to do it. This is awesome. By the time it's done and you've moved on and you have perspective on it, wherever that comes, in the end, hell is always like, I wish I hadn't engaged in that thing. Overall, even if you're not like, I'm sorry I made people feel bad, but just the way it degrades your ability to be happy or whatever.
Yeah, that's right.
If you're not looking at it through the lens of time, it's insane to do anything from hell. Because if you look at the end, this is not going to help me. Why would I ever want to do it? But it's just, anyway, that maybe we'll make a video about that at some point.
That's good.
So those were our long
answers. If only we had
answers.
some venue for something like that.
Nah, man, I wish, but that stuff is expensive. So
right.
Those were our long answers. We'd love to hear what yours are. Obviously an open-ended question, but we're always impressed by the quality of response we get.
That's right.
This time we're going to be double impressed, I know. We're going to need this kind of deep thinking because we're going here, we're going to dig deeper into the symbolism of mountains, and we're going to do it. We didn't at all through last episode, but we are going to look at the symbolism in the Bible. Because Swedenborg explains...
there are a bunch of mountains in the Bible.
It's full of mountains, and Swedenborg is often explaining correspondences through the imagery in the Bible. So we'll be talking about the world and mythology and everything in between, but also these sacred text images, and what do they tell us about love, good and bad. So let's get going to part 2. I mean, maybe this is part 3. We don't really number them anymore, but now I'm thinking there was definitely Icebreaker, the first one, whatever. This is part 2. And for part 2, we have a co-host with us. This is a mountain. Well, it's like a small one.
It might be just the top. Every mountain, I think, at least that a child draws, has a top. Right? So this is the very top of the mountain.
This was the highest rock on Everest, but we brought it here just to help us illustrate a couple of things. Because right off the bat, the idea that there's a positive and negative correspondence to mountains, as there is to anything, makes total sense, because if you just think about the way that mountains show up in the physical world, there's going to be this huge dichotomy in the impact that they have. They can be lovely and scenic and inspiring, or destructive.
And this raises an important point right away, which is that it's not just arbitrary. Like what correspondence isn't just an arbitrary assignment of a meaning to, let's call this rock country X.
Yes.
And the desk will be country Y. So, that's just arbitrary. There's nothing intrinsically rock-like about this or that. But that's not the way it is with mountains. As you say, the weather's intense up there. It can change on you. It can be a very harsh environment. And that's part of what mountains mean. They have a good side and a bad side.
That's why we went last episode into so much detail about the characteristics of mountains, because every single detail sheds more light on their meaning. And that's why correspondence is so cool. It's something about the shape and the height and the solidness. And we're going to see here a couple
Curtis,
of other.
Is there a reason I'm the volcano?
That was the graphics team, man. But
Okay,
there's got to be a correspondence to it of some kind. So we talked with our, I had the final edit, and I was like, swap it aside. So we talked because we want to bring in this mythology angle to it, because this is so obvious that we can put these pictures here and we have this emotional reaction to these things. You don't have to have Swedenborg in your mind to associate mountains with the positive and negative. So cultures all around the world, throughout history and throughout mythology, have been assigning or maybe perceiving the meaning in these. So we talked to our friend Dylan, who studied this stuff extensively, a little bit about the mythology and folklore around mountains, and we're going to use some of what he said to us as a way to move our story forward.
Before we can talk about the specific symbolism of something as broad as a mountain, I actually think it would be worthwhile to talk about symbolism itself. I think in the sense that symbolism is not a one-to-one bad dream book sort of translation. You don't say a mountain equals this, because just like Swedenborg's correspondences, just like Jungian archetypes, I think it's important to know that symbolism has everything to do with the context of what is around. I think there's a lot of debate about to what degree symbols, archetypes, correspondences are universal, this having a similar meaning across every culture. But even if they are universal, it still has to do with the specific context. A mountain in this dream does not translate to the same thing as a mountain in this folktale. And when in that sense, I think that mountains are neither good or evil. But one thing we could say about mountains, I think, is that they are significant.
Mountains are significant.
I like that word.
And that's just a truth about the world. Like the people are writing these stories and things about mountains in a significant way, because mountains are significant. If there's a mountain between you and where you need to go, you got to talk about it.
Yes, and you've got to arrange your life around, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Everybody knows where those mountain ranges are and all that. It's an organizing principle to your life.
The climate where people live is often dictated by mountain ranges.
Are you on this side or that side of the...
Huge impact. And Swedenborg says that their significance is there in part because they correspond to the most significant love, positive and negative versions of it. But this is the significance of this love, whether it's a love for ourselves alone or a love for the rest of the human race, is because it determines really the direction of our lives.
Right, you're steering around that love, and it's like it's there. It's a big thing, whether that's, as you say, a self-centered love of God, love of the neighbor, material, like love of possessions, those sorts of things.
That affects the climate and the entire rest of your mind and heart. That whatever's at the core of you affects all that stuff. And so it can be positive and loving, but also can be negative. And we see this in the Bible. There's negative mountain symbolism. This is from Revelation 8:8. So what do we got here?
The second angel sounded his trumpet, and something like a huge mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea. A third of the sea turned into blood. So that mountain was why is it being cast down? Why would it turn the sea to blood, or a third of it? It's a negative image there. That mountain is a negative, whatever it means, is a negative thing.
It sounds ominous. Anything that creates a ton of blood sounds
Probably
ominous.
bad.
And it also sounds,
as a rule of thumb.
it's just if you take nothing else from today's show. But it also sounds very symbolic. They're obviously trying to paint a picture of something. But this is what Swedenborg says this is a symbol of. And something like a huge mountain burning with fire, this symbolizes self-love. And from that, a love for one's own intelligence.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like I'm so smart.
Right.
This kind of love is meant by this mountain because a mountain in the word can symbolize either love.
There it is.
Namely, heavenly love or hellish love.
How could you have hellish love, though? That's interesting. Wouldn't it be hellish hatred or something? Hellish love is interesting.
But if you think about it, if you're in this, like, I only care about myself, you don't hate yourself. You feel
No,
like
that's right.
I'm pretty awesome, or like not even thinking about yourself as a person, but what I want is good to get.
Yes,
That's
right.
probably more the
that's
essence
right.
of it. You're not even thinking about consequences. The subject here is the evil who are to be separated from the good.
Oh, so that sounds very scary and apocalyptic when you read that verse.
Yeah.
But actually the meaning has to do with something good, that
Yes.
this evil is being removed from you.
Yeah.
Like when you're on that path, you really want that self-centeredness not to take up so much space, So having that mountain cast down and seeing what's false, that's that blood in the sea that results from it.
And doesn't this give us finally a good context to understand when Jesus Christ says, if you have faith, you can move mountains?
Oh, that wouldn't be positive. It's not like rearranging the landscape to increase your land value or something.
Yeah.
He's talking about that there's, again, that self-love can be cast down.
Yes.
If you have that relationship with the Lord, that thing can be pushed aside.
And if you're really in tune with just how hard it is to stop being selfish, it feels more amazing than an actual mountain.
Yes,
if you can get
that's right.
any progress on that. But it also, because without that explanation, that passage bugs me for two reasons. One is it's not true, because there's a lot of people with a ton of faith out there. There's nobody moving a mountain.
Hasn't moved an inch, yeah. Right.
Nobody's moving a mountain without bulldozers and explosives and things. But then also, what's so good about moving a mountain? Let's say that you were a tyrant of some kind. You would have the most resources at your disposal to just, marshal the armed forces to go move this mountain.
Like there's a mountain between your country and the next one, and you want to just get a little more territory.
That is not any kind of moral progress, just being able to move that. So why
is
would
Jesus helping you with that?
Why is God coming down to say, hey, I can help you do something that otherwise you would need dynamite to do? There's got to be a spiritual meaning. So that's the meaning
right.
there.
That's good.
So now that we've got that set up, we're learning each characteristic carries this spiritual meaning with it. So that was the significance of mountains. Let's hear from Dylan now more about the characteristics of mountains in these contexts.
Part of this constellation of images that we would create for a mountain would be just to collect all the different stories we can think of. So the first thing that comes to my mind would be the sheer size of a mountain. When anyone thinks of a mountain, whether you're in one culture in Africa or another culture in Scandinavia, the idea of a mountain by definition has to do with its size, its height, how you can see it from anywhere. So in a lot of ways, the first larger theme that would come out about the image or the symbol of a mountain would be its significant size. One sort of adage that comes to mind would be Muhammad. There's the phrase, if the mountain won't come to Muhammad, Muhammad must go to the mountain. So that's talking about the immovability of a mountain. It is permanent, and therefore we have to move to it. We have to transcend it. We have to move toward it.
You think about that size and that immovability. In the negative sense, as we talked about, this can be just how hard it is for us to dislodge ourselves from a negative life.
Wow, if you've really built your life around yourself, your own interests, and not caring, really not caring how much damage you do along the way or something like that, it would be so hard to move that aside and not have that take up center stage for you.
No, it is so hard. I've tried it.
Oh, nice.
But on the flip side, mountains can be a positive symbol, and that same size and stability is like the power of this good
apply as well
love.
to the positive kind of love. Okay.
They're actually there, and there's all kinds of positive symbolism of mountains in the Bible. We actually did a show about this called "The Spiritual Future of the Human Race." This was a very, very long time ago when the show was relatively new, and I'm really excited about our next guest that we're going to show a clip from, because this is back when we had you on as a guest, and this is Dr. Jonathan Rose talking about a very special mountain prophecy, which was a description of this awesome new era to come. So I'll let Dr. Rose take it from here.
There's an image in Scripture as another kind of correspondential image that you see is the image of the mountain. And mountains appear a lot and have great significance in the Old Testament and the New Testament. You see a lot of mention of mountains. And when there's this prediction of this future time, of this new kind of religious era or this new kind of spirituality that'll come into the world, it's often framed in terms of mountains. That's about love. It's about loving God, about loving the neighbor. It's a symbolism for mountain. You can see a little hint of this in the way that you feel. There's something exalted about mountains. Their loftiest kind of human state is represented by mountains. And the highest state that we can be in is love. It's a state of loving God and loving our neighbor. And so in the future, there will be a time that it's about the mountains. In other words, the center of this religious era will have to do with love.
You had a lot of books back then.
Yeah, and a sport coat.
What happened to that stuff?
Yeah.
Well, so we're talking about positive biblical prophecies. Let's take a look at an example of one of these. I love the idea that you were putting out there, a future centered around love. So where do we hear this being talked about in the text? So this is Isaiah 56.
Even them I will bring to my holy mountain. There'll be all kinds of people, and even this last group he's been talking about, I will bring to my holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer. You got a sort of a hint in the text there that the holy mountain is not literal because of the house of prayer.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's aligning it with, mountain is really vast and the house of prayer is much smaller. But this is a prophecy that at one point we'll be drawn towards greater and greater love like that.
Because if it was a physical mountain, you might say, "Oh, thanks so much for bringing us up here. It's going to be night
Now
soon.
what?
It gets very cold on the mountain at night.
That's right.
When it's winter, we cannot be
Storms
up
are
here."
wretched. And,
But but look at how touching this internal sense is. So this is Last Judgment 66. Once people have been received by the Lord into heaven, they can never be plucked out of His hand.
So that's the immovability you're talking about. That you've got a solidity that even, I'm thinking of the scripture that says that, before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, you're God.
Yeah.
There's things that are even beyond the mountains in stability, which is this incredible divine love.
And if you think about the struggle that we're on, if you think of heaven as a state of mind, and of the peace and the happiness that come from letting go of everything that's in the way and God getting to put us where He wants to be, you think about us being able to stay there. With how it's a struggle, it's this treadmill, it's this carousel,
right.
that it's like, we're feeling good, we're feeling really bad. Not that you don't have cycles there, but something about like, don't worry, you're not going to fall off the train.
That's right.
I love it.
I've got you. That's very reassuring.
So now we're going to get a little bit intense and weird, which is like the Swedenborg thing, because we're going to be talking about the appearance of mountains in the spiritual world and how things like this, much larger of course, are seen, but some are actually mountains and some are just the illusion.
I can't think of anything more physical and concrete than a mountain. The idea that you would have that, of all things, in the spiritual world is kind of bizarre.
This is Apocalypse Explained 5:10. The reason why a mountain can mean either heavenly or hellish love is this.
There it is again.
Angels of the third heaven who have heavenly love live on mountains in the spiritual world.
Oh.
So mountain means that third heaven. Or in terms of the way angels think about it, abstracted from people and places, it means the heavenly love that makes heaven heaven.
So that's what the mountain means. It makes that highest heaven. It's that love is actually where they live, and then they physically appear to be on mountains that manifest there.
That's the driver. It's not, this is so great being up on a mountain that I feel like I'm in heaven. But you're in that kind of love that wants to constantly do things to make life better for everyone. That elevates your spirit to that point. In the negative sense, however, a mountain means a love for oneself. Because those who are immersed in self-love, and again, this would not be like self-esteem, but this would be putting yourself above everyone else, constantly want to climb mountains and make themselves equal to angels in the third heaven.
So that ego is like, I'm just as good as you.
That's right.
I want to be up there with you.
Even though I don't have any of the love that characterizes you getting where you are.
Or the wisdom. But.
Because they think about doing this in their fantasies, they also try it when they are outside of hell. This is why mountain in a negative sense means self-love.
Very interesting explanation. Yeah.
In a word, those who are immersed in self-love always yearn for high places. So after death, when all the states of love become correspondences, they have the illusion of propelling themselves way up high and believe they are on high mountains, when in fact their bodies, or spiritual bodies,
are
in hell.
That's right. And that's an amazing statement that you when everything about your life becomes a correspondence, when you're kind of living in a world of correspondences, then you're trying to get up high there because of your self-love.
Isn't this like the reflection we were saying before, where heaven and hell can both feel good? They can both try to be the same thing to you.
Oh, yeah.
You'd think that it'd be...
They're going for the same territory, in a sense.
That it'd be like, the heaven is like a mountain because you go up high, and people in hell just want to get down really low. But no, they both like want to be on the mountain, but hell for the opposite reason. But this is this illusory track up for them, I find.
Yeah, that's right, because the center of where they are is still down in hell, because the thing that's motivating them is actually hellish, not heavenly.
In heaven, you don't even care if you're on the mountain. You care about what you're doing, and how you're helping, and the love.
And who you're better than.
But
no, that's the hell.
So that's what hell pictures heaven as. Like, I get to be way up there. I get a view. I'm going for it. They want the same. Like, hell is focused on the perks, whereas heaven is focused on the essence.
Yeah, and I picture heaven up on that mountain, just looking out and saying, "How's everybody doing?
Yeah.
What can we do for people? What would make this whole world better?" That's sort of a mountain perspective, isn't it?
Totally. And maybe because of that positive correspondence of mountains, there are some really intense. I almost moved the mountain
don't move
there.
That mountain,
I must have some decent faith going on.
Yeah.
There are some very intense experiences that happen in the Bible up on mountains. So we're going to look at some of the most famous ones coming up. It's worth noting, and we're going to note it here, that among others, Noah, Moses, and Jesus all have these really important experiences on top of mountains. And to begin this discussion, we want to look at mountains as connected with creation or recreation. And
really?
Dylan had some great thoughts about that.
Beyond the sheer size, I think that kind of takes to the next point, which would be the mountain as a symbol, its involvement in creation and recreation. A whole lot of world mythologies start with sort of prima materia. The first creation of the world is in the form of a mountain. It's a mother Earth symbol. It's a goddess symbol in old cultures, simply because it is another term would be a world navel, as though it's the very center of a universe. And for me, that makes a lot of sense. If your culture's born somewhere around a mountain, you have a natural center point. That's what every culture around that mountain is going to point to as a natural center to the universe. So that would be a world navel, a place where the whole universe sort of circulates around. It's a prima materia in another sense too, which would be that in flood myths, which we know come up in culture after culture, often as that water rises, the last place you're going to see is the peaks of mountains, and then once again the first place you see once that water starts to recede is going to be a mountaintop. So it's almost a recreation of the world at the very peaks of those mountains. It's the first place that life is reborn. So those peaks have that sense.
One of those well-known flood myths would be the story of Noah.
Yeah.
And we did a whole episode on the meaning of Noah and the flood. And in that, we had the story of Noah. Would you just catch people up in case they're not familiar? What happened in the Noah story?
Sure. God was disturbed, the way it's written in the literal meaning, by the fact that the human race had become corrupt and was bad. And so kind of we're going to reboot in modern language or something. And do people still reboot? I think they do.
If it's not working, you reboot.
Yeah,
and it usually works again.
That's right. And so the idea was that, so Noah was called to build this ark and put some humans and some animals and so on there, birds, and then they would float above this great tide of water and be able to land again and repopulate the earth after wiping out all this other life that was there that was no longer wanted. It can sound sort of harsh and cruel, but that's not the way Swedenborg explains the inner meaning.
No, in the inner meaning, the spiritual sense of it, that flood is not God's retribution. This is the actual effect of the thoughts and feelings, the things in the mind that were just turning people to this evil. So that's like you think about these destructive concepts just washing away everything that's living and good in a person when they grab onto them. And Noah was the part of us, or the people who are willing to be steered in a new direction.
Yeah, that's right.
Examine something new. And so let's read a little bit of the text of that from Genesis.
And the water strengthened greatly on the earth, and all the high mountains that were under the whole heaven were covered. Every mountain. 15 cubits, 22.5 feet if I do my math right. About 1.5 feet for a cubit. And then 15
metric?
cubits upward, the water towered, and it covered the mountain. So the idea of this flood was so amazing that it actually covered the mountains completely.
And hopefully by this point you're eager for details on symbolism, because you say, oh, it's covering the mountains. That's got to mean something.
What is going on? What's the water? What's the mountain?
We'll give you our best shot at it here. This is Secrets of Heaven 797 and following. The water that covered the mountains symbolizes the fact that persuasive lies wiped out all the good effects of charity. Swedenborg saying this happened at a point in the human race's history.
So another meaning of mountain is this charity or love for the neighbor.
Yeah.
And that was getting buried under bad teachings, persuasive lies that were going on at the time.
Even like basic human decency at this point. This is why it was such a bad era in humanity.
You couldn't even see it anymore.
Yeah, the stuff that you just think, be kind to people underwater.
You can't even see the basics of love, like even the mountain is covered up.
The meaning of 15 cubits upward, the water towered and it covered the mountains, is the fact that nothing was left of charity. So it doesn't end like that though, right? You have the storm and the water is rising. There's all kinds of trouble that people go through, but eventually you get to this mountaintop, right? The floods recede. What happens then in the story?
Well, it's sort of cool. After the water's been on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights and it rains, and then it keeps on going for a long time where he's searching for dry land, can't find it anywhere. Then it kind of makes sense that as the water slips away, he lands on the top of a mountain. That's where the ark settles, and that has a beautiful meaning too.
Yeah, because this is, as the flood is receding, this new era is beginning. So this is how the text reads.
And the ark came to rest in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, on the mountains of Ararat. What does that mean? Yeah, right. What could that possibly be? Well, there's a detailed explanation. The symbolism of the mountains of Ararat as a bit of light. Oh, this is just a little tiny. That's the first little glimmer, little inkling of something. Okay.
Right. So this is the beginning. Yeah, the beginning of the beating back of this plague that was on the human race is established by the symbolism of a mountain as the good that comes of love and charity, and of Ararat as a bit of light, the light that a regenerate person enjoys. Because this flood, sure, it happened in it's in all of us, right? We all have this flood, and the process of spiritual rebirth is Noah happening in our little minds and little hearts.
And you picture that raining 40 days and 40 nights. It's so dark.
Yeah.
Right? The world is just incredibly dark at that point. And so here's that first little light that comes up.
I'm sure you can think back to some time in your life that resonates with this story. The new glimmer, the first glimmer that comes to the regenerate individual never rises out of a knowledge of faith's truth, but out of charity.
So this is not about instruction, it's not about learning, it's not about certain thoughts that you have in your head.
Yeah.
It's a love in your heart.
Yep.
That's what makes the mountain visible. Oh, now it's appearing again. The love is coming back.
Right, and I was just going to say, it's not that other stuff isn't good to have around, but those ideas on their own are not what does it. You have to feel something.
Right.
Faith's truth are like rays of light. Love or charity is like a flame.
And I think what he's driving at there is that if you don't have the flame, you don't have the ray of light. It doesn't. A lot of people think that you can just have those truths and that'll do it, but it's got to come from that love. That's the source of the light.
It's a different experience to I know you're supposed to do this thing versus I really I want to be good to you because I just know it's I feel that it's
light
right.
Comes out of that position. That's right.
The enlightenment of one who is regenerating does not radiate from the truth belonging to faith, but from charity.
Charity is what enlightens.
Yeah. So we have that story and the meaning there, and that heavenly love that we begin to get there eventually leads us to genuine enlightenment, which Dylan talks a bit about.
Another symbol beyond that would be the idea of transcending a mountain in a philosophical sense. Even the word transcendence, we have a double meaning. Transcend literally just means to ascend the mountain, to go up the mountain. So to use that as a symbol for enlightenment makes a whole lot of sense. I think it's very fitting that Buddhist temples are placed at the tops of mountains. We always, when we go to a mountain, the first thing you're trying to do is climb the mountain and reach a literal transcendence place. But moments of transcendence, I think, can be seen throughout the world.
Well, and the stories of Moses would be a prime example of these transcendent moments. You have, first of all, the burning bush is well known. That's at the base of a mountain, right? Or heading up.
That's right. It was at the base of a mountain, and he saw the burning bush that was strangely not consumed, and then God spoke to him there and called him. And it strikes me right now that was such a moment of transformation for him. He'd been a humble shepherd hiding out from a bad thing he'd done years before in Egypt. And here he is out in the wilderness, and then now God's speaking to him, turning him into a leader. So he's being transformed. He's going into a transcendent state.
That's really like when he started being Moses, as we all think of Moses. Also, but that wasn't his only one. He was up on Mount Sinai, receiving the 10 Commandments, which was another turning point. But while he was up there, from the ground, it looked kind of frightening to the people.
Yeah, right? The way it's described, there was thunder and lightning and earthquakes, and the people, the way the Bible tells the story, they were terrified. They even said at some point to Moses, "You speak to God for it. We don't want to talk to him directly."
I don't want to mess with
terrifying.
that. Yeah. And so Dylan has some comments on why this sort of intense, sort of fearful appearance.
Moses has a deep association with the mountain. You can imagine the spectacle of a mountain where storms collect around the peak of that mountain. You can actually not see the peak of a mountain. It is in a different world. It's above the clouds. And so the idea of being the one that ascends that mountain and sees what others cannot makes a whole lot of sense. So Moses ascends the mountain and sees the fiery bush, the burning bush that is not consumed, and is enlightened and learns, meets face to face for the first time with Yahweh, and goes down the mountain with a new purpose, even if he's afraid of it. And then later in the story, he brings all of the children of Israel to Mount Sinai. And once again, at that point, it's a thunder god, it's a sky god in a very pristine sort of sense. There's terrifying clouds and a voice in the booming thunder. As Moses ascends, you see him transcending in his own enlightenment. So when he ascends the mountain and speaks face to face with God and is going to receive the enlightenment that's going to shape Israel for the next thousands of years, he has the 10 Commandments written out, and then he has to descend the mountain and sort of take that enlightened knowledge that might be too high for an earthly dwelling people, and he has to come down and translate that for those people.
So it's important to go up into that scary place because what you can get out of it. But let's look at how the text writes this story here. So this is Exodus.
And the glory of Jehovah stayed on Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it 6 days. And he, Jehovah, called to Moses on the 7th day out of the middle of the cloud. And the sight of Jehovah's glory was like a consuming fire on the head of the mountain, meaning the top of the mountain, in the eyes of the children of Israel. And Moses entered the middle of the cloud and went up to the mountain. So he, just as Dylan was saying, he went right up out of sight. He disappeared from sight.
And that going up is a symbol of us going up toward heaven, towards heavenly love and truth and God. But so why was there this cloud visible from below? And what did it mean? This is what Swedenborg says in Secrets of Heaven. And the cloud covered it symbolizes the final level of the Word, which is as obscure as a cloud by comparison. So this is the book of the Bible giving commentary on how it's so confusing in its commentary.
Yes, right.
The reason the literal meaning is as obscure as a cloud is that it is designed for people who are still in the world, whereas the inner meaning is designed for people who have gone to heaven. Isn't that the inner meaning we're trying to talk about right now? So this is like above our pay grade.
Yes.
Okay, great.
We have to have at least part of our head in the cloud for this one.
Bear in mind, though, that people alive in the world are nonetheless awake to the word. Oh, here we go. Awake to the word's inner meaning if they subscribe to the church's true theology in their faith and in their life.
And in their life. Important little tagline there. That's right.
When these people go to heaven, the only way they understand the word is in accord with its inner meaning. So there you don't have mountain and Moses and those characters.
Names of rivers. And yeah, that's right.
It's like this pure love and the journey and everything that it actually means. The word in its literal meaning is divine truth on the final plane of the hierarchy. It is like a house and its foundation. The house proper is heaven, where one finds divine truth as it exists in the word's inner meaning. The foundation is the world, where one finds divine truth as it exists in the word's outer meaning.
Yes, the foundation.
Yeah.
That's cool.
We haven't quite, though, gotten to why does God look so scary at the top of the mountain? And I guess we'll never really know. Just kidding. This is from Secrets of Heaven. Swedenborg explains, and the sight of Jehovah's glory was like a consuming fire on the head of the mountain in the eyes of the children of Israel, symbolizes divine truth in heaven itself, radiant with a loving goodness. Although, so that loving goodness is not so scary, right?
That's a good thing.
Although, to people intent on the outer aspect of that truth in isolation from its inner aspect, it brings trauma and devastation. Here is the situation. There are two kinds of love diametrically opposed to each other. Heavenly love and hellish love. Heavenly love is love for the Lord and for one's neighbor, love for the good of everyone. Hellish love is love for oneself and for one's worldly advantages. People in whom the hellish kind of love reigns supreme are in hell, but people in whom the heavenly kind of love reigns supreme are in heaven. It is now time to say how divine fire, divine love, works in people who possess heavenly love and how it works in people who possess hellish love. So again, you might think, hellish love, what is that? But it's just your attraction to the object of your desire. So if the object of your desire is something harmful, you love it, but it doesn't mean it's a heavenly.
Right, and it might be a small point here, but it might sound like Swedenborg's criticizing the people at the bottom of the mountain compared to Moses or something like that. This is everybody. This is any state. We all end up in this state from time to time.
Right.
That when you're in that state and possessing that hellish love, that's how it looks to you. You've got that bad perspective.
In people with heavenly love, divine fire or love is constantly creating and renewing the inner reaches of their will and illuminating the inner reaches of their intellect.
Oh, I like the idea of that renewal. That's cool.
That's right. In people with hellish love, divine fire or love is constantly inflicting trauma and devastation to the object of your love. Because you think, if what I want to do is harm people for my own gain, love is my enemy. Truth is my enemy. I don't want people to know what I'm up to. It's not that God is attacking you because you're not good. It's because you're incompatible with society, with living together with people. In the latter people, you see, divine love alights in what is opposed to itself, and those opposite qualities destroy it. In such people, it turns into the fire of self-love and materialism, and consequently into contempt for others. So we're taking what should be divine love and truth, turning it into contempt for others, hostility towards everyone who does not favor them, and therefore into acts of hatred, revenge, and finally, savage cruelty. None of those are recommended behaviors.
No,
that is why the fire of Jehovah in the eyes of the children of Israel looked like a consuming fire. So
yes, the children of Israel, they're meaning people who are in that state of hellish love. Not that they were in that state, but in the language of the correspondences, that's what's going on. And so it's like there's that biblical story where the same thing was darkness to one group and light and comfort to another group. You know, it's all about your perspective. I love the way that the Bible, even though it's thousands of years old, has this wisdom in it about perspective, you know, of how things look from different perspectives.
Yeah, and even Jesus participated in this because he had an important experience on a mountain as well, and we'll have Dylan give an intro to that.
So it's a symbol of transformation because later on, just as Moses is transformed into the leader, to the earthly face of God at that moment, later Jesus has a very, very important transfiguration on the mountaintop.
Would you fill people in on what was the transfiguration?
There was a particular point at which Jesus took 3 of his disciples, Peter, James, and John, aside and took them up a very high mountain. And when he was up there, his face started to shine like the sun, and his clothing is shining with light. And Moses and Elijah, who had died centuries before appear beside him and are having a conversation with him, and they were so overwhelmed that, they were terrified, and they felt like they were passing out and everything from the experience, and so they were really seeing him as he was internally.
And you might say, if you're them, oh, we have to go through this intense experience. Why do we also have to walk up a mountain? You're Jesus, can't you just do it down here?
Yeah, do it down. Why not do it down the valley? Right.
It's about the correspondence. So this is the full communication with the spiritual meaning, and it makes it a teaching tool for the rest of us. This is how
love sees who he was. Yeah.
That's awesome. This is Apocalypse Revealed, where Swedenborg talks about it. Mountains mean people who possess the goodness of love, inasmuch as angels dwell upon mountains, as we talked about. Those motivated by love toward the Lord on loftier mountains, those motivated by love toward the neighbor on less lofty ones. Consequently, every mountain symbolizes all goodness of love. Since a mountain symbolized heaven and love, therefore Jehovah came down upon the top of Mount Sinai and proclaimed the law.
A lot of people think the Ten Commandments are not about love at all, but that was why he gave the law on a mountain, was that it's actually about love. Again, people can see that from a very negative, worldly perspective or something, but it's actually from love.
And therefore the Lord was transfigured before Peter, James, and John on a high mountain. Therefore Zion was also located on a mountain, and so too Jerusalem.
Yeah.
All this stuff because why are mountains there so much? Because love is the point. Love is the most important thing to have commentary on in Revelation.
That's what creates renewal. That's what creates that transcendence. That's what's really solid and stable. Nothing is more stable, actually, than love.
So we're talking up love here. Maybe you disagree. Now is the time to get your comments in, because we're headed to the Q&A right now. We'll see you on the other side of this 20-second break. We love interacting with y'all, and we love getting to meet you and hear from you. We got this mountain, but full size of love for interacting with you. So if any of you feel inspired to ever send in a little testimonial about, and what we'd love to hear is how did some kind of Swedenborg concept help you out in your life, or how did, what's something that is brought to you. We'd love to show it on this show. We actually have a sample here because one of our viewers, Tryn, was kind enough to send in a little clip, and so we're going to hear it's just 30 seconds, but here's a little bit about how the concepts move in her life.
Hi, I'm Tryn Rose. I'm a Swedenborgian Christian, and I'm delighted that I grew up knowing that the divine is the same in the greatest and the least of things. Feel like it's such a pleasure to see my Arizona garden blooming and delighted, and the lizards coming by and the butterflies, and that it was all created by the Lord in a beautiful form.
That's so cool. This is a thought.
Yeah, that's right. And
right.
Cool. We're talking about delight, noticing the beauty, the encompassing. That's the encompassing things of the Lord. That's what we're trying to get into the mind. This is the mountain we want to live on. So if you guys want to submit your videos as well, we'd be happy to play them here. So let's get to some questions now. Hopefully during that, I was going to say during that video, get your questions in, but it's better we pay attention. Time for questions now. Let's see what's happening in the chat. This is the first one. Robert Bush asks, why did God make spiders, scorpions, deer flies, etc.? If you live in the northeast of the United States, you'd probably say Lyme disease carrying ticks.
That's right.
What's the answer?
Well, Swedenborg's perspective, as I understand it, is that those things are all reflections of states of mind that people can be in, of a type of thought, or a type of feeling. In fact, angels tell Swedenborg that that's how these species got started in the first place, was they were actually somebody's feeling. So somebody felt a scorpion. And I think when I look in myself, I'm not thankfully feeling it right now, but you can have feelings that are that sort of like, you better not, I'm going to get you.
Right.
And if it's the last thing I do type of thing, or the spider that's lurking in the center. A lot of spiders are blind. I didn't know this for a long time. Wolf spiders are not, but a lot of spiders are blind, so they're at the center of their web just waiting to catch something. And, these depict something about ourselves, deer flies and everything. So even though they're harmful, and generally Swedenborg says if it's harmful, then it's probably got a negative correspondence, but it doesn't mean that thing is negative, you know?
Yes. Here we start to get into the nuances of correspondences.
That's right.
Correspondence nuances.
Interesting that would come up.
And yes, and that yes, it doesn't, just because everything that's an animal is just doing what it's supposed to do. No, just because a reindeer just wants to eat lichen and doesn't try to harm you in the same way doesn't mean it's morally superior to a polar bear or
it really didn't have a choice about
No,
it.
animals just live in the order of their lives. The question of why the orders of their lives are like they are, yes, has to do with the physical world being an echo of the spiritual world. So if there's this kind of evil in the spiritual world, it's going to find an outlet in the physical world. And it gets me thinking too, though, I was saying stuff about ticks that carry disease that really, so around the northeast of the United States, there's this fear of these ticks that cause Lyme disease, which is this like really terrible condition.
Nasty.
They're just hard to diagnose and go, it's just like the worst thing.
Mask itself as many
it's not actually the ticks that do that. It's this microorganism that they carry. So what's the correspondence with that? And because if there wasn't that microorganism, ticks would just be a nuisance. So is that like, there are certain kinds of thinking or feeling that you get into that if they didn't have this other thing within them, they wouldn't be that bad. But if they didn't lead to that other thing. So I don't know, like we're obviously having to deal with that, and the whole animal world is having to deal with all kinds of interspecies violence. And I don't think that's how it would be in a perfect world. But since it's there, you can learn amazing things by looking into the correspondences of it.
And Swedenborg is pretty strong on the idea that every single thing serves some kind of a use. It serves some kind of a function.
Yeah.
And sometimes discovering that function, or sometimes things function better when they're in this niche and then they get out of control or something.
Yeah.
And you've lost the balance or something. But and the same way with human beings. All different kinds of, the Lord puts evil people to use as well as good people. The whole thing is a kingdom of uses.
Well, and we think, spiders, I wish there was no spiders. We would be in a lot of trouble if there was no spiders. Because, and this is sort of like God is taking everybody, no matter what their character, and having them eat heaven and hell, all in between, somehow having them contribute to the common good.
Different states, and
So we don't really,
it's pretty amazing.
I mean, we sort of answered your question. I don't know. It's not our job to answer anyone's questions. Okay, on to the next question.
Certainly not our job to judge whether we actually answered it.
Mary Richard asked, do we inherit from God like we inherit from our dad? I would say
question.
Would be nice, right? Well, you inherit life, right? So all of our capacity, everything. And if you're looking at like, hey, you look a little bit like your dad. Everybody looks like God because we're in the human image.
Image and likeness, And I've also been reading Divine Providence, which is so strong on this idea.
Yeah.
That's right. Have you heard of him?
No.
And he's hammering this idea of freedom and rationality, and that these are gifts that are given to us every second and never taken away to eternity, no matter what we do with them.
Yeah.
Well, that's a pretty huge inheritance.
Yeah.
Because they really are, only God is really free and really rational, but is able to give those things to us as if they were our own. So it's kind of like an inheritance,
Yeah, it's interesting that rather than genetics, the genes that are expressed when we're born, you sort of think of your genetic inheritance as something that's immediately present in you. Sort of our spiritual inheritance from God is something that is unlocked through the process of regeneration. Because we're meant to end up a spitting image of God. Swedenborg says you become an image or a likeness. I can never remember which one is better, but
it actually changes in different passages.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay, so I have every right to be confused about that. But they both mean essentially that the more we are loving, friendly, compassionate, wise people, the more we are just like a real picture of the God is just coming right through. So you're seeing God. So we can, through the work of spiritual regeneration and rebirth, you become, you look just like God. You're like, hey, are you the child of God? I see God in you.
Yeah, that's right.
In that way, we all inherit that capability, and it's like this life is kind of where we get our spiritual genetics all in order, so that if we get them right, then in the other life, they all manifest, or they all express.
And all that material is in there potentially, and also when you're young, you're given these heavenly experiences before you can really stop the process from happening.
Yeah.
What Swedenborg calls remains or remnants, sort of a substrate on which your spiritual life can be built. So we get good things like that. Everybody gets good things.
That's like the trust fund, God's trust fund for you. That's the other kind of inheritance that's there
True.
for us if we decide to cash it in.
That's right.
Thanks for the question.
Good question.
Let's do another one. Why not? Mike S. asks, many spiritual traditions, some centuries old, claim that this reality is illusion or Maya based on Buddhism. Does Swedenborg address this? Thanks. So,
Yeah.
there's a combination of reality and illusion to, I think, what we're experiencing here. Certainly, our perception colors everything that's here. Swedenborg even talks about that it's actually the spiritual that flows into the physical and not the reverse. So while we think our mind is kind of being shaped by what we see and what we hear, it's actually the spiritual part of us making the calls and sort of informing the way we see the world around us. So in that way, if we're stuck in illusions and things, it can really create an illusion of how we perceive the world around us.
Yeah, and I don't know that he would call it a world of pure illusion quite to that Maya sort of extent.
Yeah.
But he does talk about appearances. He talks about appearances in connection with Scripture, that there are things that appear to be true, like God being angry or something, but it isn't really that way. And I think that's certainly got to be the case with all kinds of other things, that there are things that are actually a manifestation, like mountains. Mountains are a manifestation of something.
Yeah.
But how you read them or whatever, how they manifest, it certainly is a less, and in a way it's less, I don't want to say less real, but it's less alive. Like you get more life as you go up the chain.
Yeah, and so think about this. What are we talking about when we say the world? Because sure, if you're talking about, there's a physical mountain over there, there's a tree there, that might not be illusion, but what is the actual world to us as we live our life? It's the story we tell ourselves about the world, which is, I'm this isolated thing, there are these other people that are either like my enemies, or if they like me, then I like them. There doesn't appear to be any kind of God or divine being. There are things that I should be afraid of. Is my life going anywhere? It's chaotic. There are these good and bad things. They both seem about the same to me. We begin life, or once we get into our adolescence or whatever, completely steeped in illusion. Like all of our conclusions...
And we don't realize it.
All of our conclusions and feelings about the world are totally false. It's not at all how life actually is. So that world, Swedenborg says, we begin as nothing but evil and falsity after this remnant period. That is total illusion. And to get out of that, then you may be looking at the same physical world, but your beliefs about it and what you pull out of it, 100% different. Now you've got this same physical input, but you've got this enlightenment behind it. So I would say, like with everything, there are similarities and differences in the Swedenborg.
Yes, that's right. And that once you get to that point, Swedenborg's teachings do get you to that point, I think, where you start to question, am I really having this thought? Is this the thought that I'm having? Is this a good thought? Is that a good feeling? Where you get, which I think is what the Maya concept has some of that in it, where you take it with a grain of salt. You're a little bit, you hold it at arm's length a little bit.
Our whole thoughtscape is illusion. That we begin thinking, I'm responsible for everything.
Having thoughts. I'm a life form in my own right.
Yeah. I'm responsible for everything that happens in my head and in my heart. This is all just kind of my perception about the world. Swedenborg is saying, step back and realize that we're part of this larger spiritual complex, and that you need to be more discerning about what you think and act on. Just because something there doesn't mean it's yours. It's totally different. What we start out with is total illusion.
Yeah.
So
it's true.
Yeah. So anyway, that's awesome. Great question. That's our questions. Let's get on to hear how you answered another question.
All right.
This is the ice melter. Do you guys remember that from the beginning? We had the icebreaker. Okay. So let's review. We asked the audience, what do they think about something that related, and let's see how it all came. The question was, how can you tell the difference between something positive and negative, feelings of love and pleasure? I remembered it.
Slow.
What did you all have to say? This is the first slide. The negative kinds ends up with crummy consequences.
That's right.
Positive ones will come out of love of God and love of our neighbor. from good will triumph. Awesome. I tell these apart because true love is proven by what is done and not just what is said.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, actions, not just words.
Right.
Yeah.
I think they feel the same, but the aftertaste is different, maybe.
Nice.
Most negative pleasure bothers your conscience, right? The way I tell the difference is true positive loves and actions will never hurt or abuse someone else. Intention is everything.
That's correct.
Intention is the soul of the
so
action.
true.
All right? If you are spiritually aware, the positive kind of love will always leave you feeling uplifted and joyful. The negative kind of love never lasts long.
That's it.
Impermanence, and you end up feeling deflated and disillusioned. What are the side effects? Evil can be done for good reasons. Good can be done for bad reasons. It is the purpose and goal with a mix of justice and mercy that determines if it is truly good.
It's good.
Awesome. Positive love and pleasure. Our loves are in the right order. Love of God, others first. I try to ask myself if it's from love of self or love towards others and or God. Yeah, right. So discern.
good.
So use the intellect to discern what's going on in the will.
It's tricky to tell.
Yes, if your self-importance is stoked, that's a great indication your influence is hellish.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
And isn't it always stoked? Positive pleasures benefit more than just yourself. Negative pleasures tend to be more self-centered, such as conditional love or when someone's ego is being fed when doing self-righteous things.
Self-righteous, yeah.
Real love is the guy or gal who puts the sacks of groceries on the poor people's porch, rings the bell and runs away, never telling anybody they did it because they did the act out of love and not limelight.
That's good.
The knowing the good you did is its own reward. Positive,
Yeah, that's right. That's how the angels view it.
Right. Positive love desires to cause no harm, but rather desires to be of service, to bring joy, healing, pleasure to another human being and all humanity. Negative love is self-centered, harms others, etc. Awesome interpretations, and it seems that that you've got to use your thinking brain to examine things. Just to step back and say, okay, you can't tell by feeling. Let's examine the clues here, and you can often get a pretty good picture.
It's a lifelong pursuit, I think, to try to get better and better at telling. What's active in you at a given moment.
That's the whole game, man. That's what we're doing here in life. If you want us to help us get better and better at making shows, again, like and subscribe. If you didn't want to do it in the beginning, this is a great way this is the easiest way to support the Swedenborg Foundation.
That's
so
right.
Please subscribe today. Click the little bell if you want to know whenever we put something cool out. The second easiest way to support is join us on Patreon. We are a nonprofit, so financial support, this is just like a couple of dollars a month, gets you to be a patron of our program, that you're part of the group that's making this blast out into the world, and we give you a little behind the scenes gold to say thanks. I mean, it's pretty cool. Anyway, check us out there, patreon.com/offtheLeftEye. All right, so next week, we're going to be taking a look. This is an awesome story next week where
powerful.
We look into the story of a couple who lost their son to terrorism and how Swedenborg's ideas helped them get through that difficult time and what that could mean for each of us as we face our own things in life.
Get to hear them actually testify about it. It's amazing.
It's going to be powerful. Thanks, Jonathan, for hanging out.
Good fun.
Thanks all of you, and we'll see you here same time next week.
Swedenborgian Life Live is Curtis Childs, host and showrunner, with co-host Jonathan Rose. Live stream tech and graphics by Stuart Farmer and Matthew Childs. Show writing and chat moderation by Karin Childs and Chelsea Odner.